This is the Philanthropy Show, connecting and inspiring philanthropy. Here's your host, Louanne Walters.
Welcome to the Philanthropy Show. I'm Louanne Walters, your host. Do you remember that theme? Doesn't it make you just want to say, who are you going to call? Well, instead of a Ghostbuster, for the nonprofit, often the consultant is the one who comes to the rescue. We have a special group that has formed in Tampa Bay, and today joining me as my guest is Liz Wooten Reschke, who is a founding member of the Nonprofit Consultants Connection. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It takes a very special consultant, doesn't it, to answer the call to a nonprofit, because nonprofits don't necessarily need somebody who's fluid in corporate speak, but who can really identify with the issues of the nonprofit.
I would say so. It takes a certain heart and head to be a nonprofit consultant.
And it's a little bit different in the challenges that they face. You know, we've said a couple of times, corporations have widgets or services that they can sell, but nonprofits are working with clients who don't necessarily have the ability to pay them.
Right.
And so there's a different dynamic there. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Liz. How did you get involved in the nonprofit world? What drove you to wanting to form this organization?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, because I've actually been involved in nonprofits, I would say, almost the entirety of my life. I was a Girl Scout at a very young age. I was a dancer in professional ballet, and had the opportunity to really do some things for the convalescent center locally. Very involved in my church growing up. Had great examples from my parents who were both involved at the high school level, in the community, in Lions International as boosters and board members and supporters. So really have kind of always been in nonprofits, but I guess didn't realize that until I got into my master's degree, and I looked back and I said, wow, I really have been involved in nonprofits an entire lifetime.
I love how you just put that into a framework. I like to say that philanthropy is everybody's business.
It absolutely is.
And what you have just done is outlined how you can go from being a child to an adult and being touched by so many nonprofit organizations and not know it. I'd love it if people could take a step back and do exactly in their life what you've just laid out. That's fantastic.
Well, it was absolutely an opportunity, I think, for me as I started to do my research in nonprofit sector, and you know, it has many names, the social sector, the not-for-profit sector, and so you think of that and you think of what those organizations encompass, you know, from the university to the grassroots organization and everything in between. I mean, I always like to say the NCAA, that's a nonprofit. The NFL is a nonprofit. It's not what you typically think of as a nonprofit, but at the same time, there are local organizations. There's a wonderful organization where I got my rescue animals from, a very small organization locally that rescues animals from all around the country, also a nonprofit. And so there's a really great diversity in the sector that I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, and it touches everybody's life in some capacity at some time and in some way, some more than others.
Yes.
So how did you get involved with the Nonprofit Consultants Connection? What was the pathway,
well,
the journey there?
The impetus really was, I'm a community connector by nature. I grew up in a small community, and I love the opportunity of connecting with folks. I'm one of those people who, very much like my stepfather, could be in a mall or in an airplane and make a friend very quickly. I've always been one of those types of people. And so as I entered into consultancy, I looked around at the landscape and the consultants that I knew that were stellar in our community, and I said, I'm meeting with you all individually. Why are we not all working together? Why are we not all talking to one another? I got a lot of fun answers related to that. But it was an opportunity, I think, to really look at our landscape locally and say, well, we are a community. And we know our nonprofit community in Tampa Bay is a small community, and that we all know one another and we interact with one another. So why not, as consultants, do the same and kind of model the landscape that we operate in? Did
you look around the country at different models?
I did.
So there are other consultant
They're
groups.
Interesting, and there's some groups that have actually been operating for 20 plus years.
Wow.
There's some groups out of, I think, New York City, Boston, Chicago area, and there's a group, Women in Consulting, out of California, which is all obviously women, not just consultants who work with nonprofits, but consulting in general. And so kind of looked at those national models, and really thought, you know, what could we pull from that really was going to work in our region, in Tampa Bay. Looking at that, I think, you know, Tampa Bay is very inclusive in that it's probably 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 counties, depending on who you're asking.
Do those 6, 7, 8, 9 counties fall within any type of specific nonprofit personality that you saw when you were looking at the other regions around the country?
I would almost venture to say that some of the other regions are a bit more homogenous than we are. You can traverse into a different county, and it's very different the way things work in that particular county, whether it's government driven, whether it's university or culturally driven. And so it's very interesting that you can cross into a county that's literally right next to its neighbor and have it be an entirely different landscape. For example, there are some national chapters that are local here, like Girl Scouts, and they've combined some of their local organizations lately and have had some interesting dynamics change because you're combining a lot of different cultures. And so there's a huge culture shift when it comes to nonprofits, both on the national level, but also those if you're a small organization working with all of those counties or working with clients who live in each of those counties.
So what is it that you do as a consultant? What is your area or areas of expertise?
My areas of expertise has actually evolved over the lifetime of consultancy, but primarily what I focus on now is board governance, organizational development. That does include strategic planning sometimes. What that also incorporates is coaching and training, and related to coaching and training and facilitation. Because again, that community builder in me, I love to kind of play devil's advocate, challenge the status quo when it comes to more traditional thinking in a board or more traditional thinking in a nonprofit to say, how could you think bigger? How could you maybe think differently and really make it work for your organization?
Well, the reason I asked that was because you were just talking about the different demographics and that the community is not necessarily as homogenous as some others that are reflected across the country, and that made me think, wow, what does she do? And so you're working with boards that are also not necessarily as homogenous.
Correct.
And that makes it kind of challenging.
Yes.
There's a difference there. Have you also worked as a consultant for corporations?
I haven't, and I kind of specifically stayed away from that. Most of the work that I've done with corporations is related to philanthropic advising, and that is connecting those organizations with the social sector, with the nonprofit sector, so that, you know, for example, if an employee is interested in giving or in serving as a board member, connecting them in an educated way to the sector, and vice versa, because I know as a sector, as nonprofits, we haven't necessarily always done the best to take care of our volunteers or our donors in the best efficient way, and we're all...
Or ourselves, or our databases, or the health of our organization, because we have a lack of fund scenario that may be going on. And I want to talk really about those needs when we come back. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Liz Wooten Reschke from the Nonprofit Consultants Connection when we come back on the Philanthropy Show. Does this sound familiar? Do your friends and family keep telling you, get on Facebook? Or maybe you already are on Facebook, but you find yourself stuck, not quite sure what to do. I've been teaching social media for more than 6 years to entrepreneurs, small businesses, and nonprofits, and I've helped many of my friends who are themselves grandparents get set up and familiar with the basics of Facebook. I've been waiting for a class just made for grandparents and boomers to come along so I could pass it on to them. And then I realized, why am I waiting? So I reached out to a couple dozen or so of our grandparent friends, asking them, what are your main questions and frustrations around using Facebook? And that's what this course is all about. Using screen recordings like this one, I will walk you through the answers and also use markup tools to point out specific things that I think are important for those lectures. In addition, I've put together some documents for you that you can use as resource guides. You can print these or download them and access what you've just learned in the previous lecture or in the previous section. You can take this course at your own speed, skip to lectures that answer your main questions first, or take the lectures in order to build your knowledge base. So, are you ready to have fun and learn about this Facebook thing? Enroll today, and I'll see you in class. Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show, talking with Liz Wooten Reschke today about Nonprofit Consultant Connection and how consultants can really affect change and help local nonprofits. And you actually may have a consultancy group in your neighborhood, in your community. I'd encourage you to look into that because you really can benefit from a nonprofit consultant who can identify with your issues. Specifically, in talking with you about your work with boards and board governance. So what are we finding in the Tampa Bay community? And I'm going to bet that this is mirrored across the country. But what do you see really are some of the key issues for the boards?
Well, the interesting part, and I'll kind of back up before I move forward with the question, is that boards in and of themselves are all volunteer driven. So you've got a number of dedicated individuals who have committed, for better or for worse, to move forward with this commitment and service to this organization. And they are not only legally liable for what goes on in the board.
As a volunteer.
As a volunteer. They also now have a huge investment of time, treasure, talent that goes into the success of this organization. So that kind of fundamental piece always makes it really interesting. And locally, and I think nationally too, what you find on a lot of boards are folks who are very well intentioned and may not fully understand their responsibilities. And so there's organizations like BoardSource, which is a national resource for board governance expertise, that helps kind of educate folks. There's a number of other resources, again, nationally and locally, but I think locally, you've got a lot of different things. You, again, have very well-intentioned people, many of whom actually have experience on several boards. So that's one of the things I see locally, is that you've got a number of people who sit on many, many boards. And so I would distinguish sitting on a board between serving on a board, because it's a real commitment to be a board member. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of treasure often.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot of talent.
And I'm going to pause you on that because I do think that's one of the key issues that a lot of nonprofits are consumed with, is that they may have names on their board but not helping hands.
Correct.
And sometimes it can be that somebody who's sitting on a board simply wants to increase their resume. You know, they want to make their CV look better, and that's unfortunate. And it's hard for a small or even a mid-sized nonprofit to have that conversation with the board member to say, but you need to commit. You need to help us with this. We need to have some time. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with a lack of
Engagement.
Engagement, yeah.
Well, and I'm going to say something that's not necessarily a popular thought, and that is that those who are on the board to build their resume are not necessarily a negative thing. I think everyone has a role, and provided that they are living up to their expectations and serving the board in a productive way, more power to them. I mean, you've got people who are on boards for name recognition, you've got people on boards to build their resume, people who are on boards, like myself, to either build their career or to build their social kind of circle of friends, and then also those who want to be there to support the cause. So I think going in engagement really needs to
How does that help the nonprofit, though? You know I have to ask
Of
this, because there are
course.
people who are watching this going, what?
Well,
What did she just say?
The way that I say it helps the nonprofits is this: there is no one-size-fits-all board. You don't
Well,
need
absolutely.
You don't need a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. You know, at all of the other folks that kind of make up
I
that
only
magical
had this,
equation.
yes, exactly.
There is no magical equation to the perfect board. And 9 times out of 10, probably more than 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, there's no such thing as a perfect board, because we are people. A board is made up of dedicated people, and I don't know anybody who's perfect. So I think with that, you know, as a nonprofit, you've got this wonderful collection of folks who care about your mission. Hopefully, that's the instill. You also have folks that are there for hopefully the right reasons, and the right reasons being because they want to give back. I don't think the right reason is why they serve on the board. I think it's how are they engaged? Are they active? Are they participating? Are they informed? And the informed side, I think, is just as much on the nonprofit as it is on the board member.
And there are different types of work, too. It doesn't have to necessarily be volunteer hours at an event or volunteer hours in the office. It may be that you happen to be a very connected member of the community, and you can help the executive director get connected to somebody that they really need to know, whether for whatever resource. It might be
Absolutely.
because they're looking for hiring an accountant, and they happen to be in the know and can hook them up with that. Tell me more about the board governance then, too. So how do you get a board going and engaged and turned around and motivated? This is a class, by the way. I know. I'm asking you in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, because oftentimes as a consultant, you'll come in and you'll have the initial consult with your potential client or your confirmed client, and you'll move forward and say, okay, well, what do you see as some of the underlying issues? What do you think some of the causes may be? And where are you hoping as an organization to move? And you'll sometimes get a very straightforward piece. Sometimes you'll get, oh, no, everything is fine. We're moving forward. And then sometimes when you get in, you'll see that the dynamics of the board kind of are the cornerstone, really, of where the success of that organization is going to go. I never think it's a negative thing if there are issues in the dynamics of the board, if they say we want to develop the board. It's almost that acceptance of we know we have something we can't address. And how do we address it? We can reach out to a consultant. We can talk to our other peers who are board members.
Well, and you as a
move through that.
consultant, you're a third party, so you're not partial to the employee, you're not partial to
Right.
the board, you're trying to bridge that gap.
Right.
You know, talk a little bit about that position and
Sure.
walking that line.
It's actually one of my favorite opportunities because I love to play devil's advocate. I've been a why for years. And my mom, I'm sure, would attest to that. It's probably since 7 I was asking the question why nonstop and incessantly. But it's fun to be a third party because you get the opportunity to help bridge the gap, literally, because there's a relationship there. But oftentimes it's a relationship that's already been formed. So you can introduce yourself or your firm into the organization and can say, you know, I hear what you're saying. It's almost like a mediator. I hear what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying. And here's what I see that's common about those, and here's what I see that's different. And how do we then make that productive for the agency? One of my favorite things to do as a consultant is to meet with founders. Because I, you know, again, as myself now a founder, I have that expertise. I like to push founder buttons and ask the question of, so when have you decided to leave? What's your succession plan? Because a lot of founders...
This is my baby.
Yes, and I
it's
fully
hard.
understand that as one of the founding members of Nonprofit Consultants Connection. But I think, again, you have the opportunity as a third party to come in with a completely different perspective. And sometimes you're echoing what the board chair or the executive director or CEO has already been saying. But when it's almost like that, the opportunity then when you have a new friend comes into the, you know, a group.
It's fresh blood. It's a fresh
Absolutely
perspective.
is.
Absolutely. You can re-energize. When is it an appropriate time? What's an example or a couple of examples of when a nonprofit can turn to a consultant versus needing to hire an employee, for example?
Well, I will tell you that hiring of consultants has actually become more prominent since the recession. And that's mainly because of the benefits, you know, the actual benefit side of things as far as HR and all of those things.
That the organization doesn't have to provide.
Correct.
Because the consultant has their own.
Correct. Well, that said, I think there are a lot of different opportunities. For example, in our membership, we have folks that do grant writing. So, for example, if you don't have a staffer that does grant writing, or you lose a staffer, or have to eliminate a position, or need that assistance, you can then contract with those folks to help write grants for your organization and win additional funds to increase operational support, to increase program support, and kind of spiral forward. There's also the opportunity, depending on the consultant, if you're going through a leadership succession, whether it's staff, if it's the CEO or executive director, that's always pretty important. We also have consultants that do recruiting and training for some of those organizations who are looking for their key leadership. You also have the opportunity when there's board transition, and I think that's why I always love my role as a consultant, because most times boards rotate 1 to 2 years. Your terms are anywhere between 1 to 3 years. There's succession up to certain different equations. And so it's a constant dynamic.
The new ones have to be trained.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oriented and engaged and introduced and informed. And so there's a constant dynamic. If that's not already part of your culture, then that's where a consultant can also come in and help build a culture of engagement, a culture of culpability and accountability, so that you as an organization can move forward.
And I think what you've done in founding Nonprofit Consultants Connection, which I am pleased to be a board member of and serve on, is that there is now a body of consultants in Tampa Bay, and the resources that we have in being able to turn to each other and say, hey Liz, how do I, or did you ever have this problem, or you know, you have a client in this situation. And so there's a I don't want to say sisterhood because we do have a couple of men, but there's a camaraderie there that's it's a trusted environment.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's a community of learning.
Sure, to be able to talk and to have a referral. So if I have an organization that needs somebody, and I know that you have that skill set too, I can turn and come.
Right.
So good thinking, good vision there. Thank you for having that. We're going to take another short break, and then we'll come right back. Whether you're a solo entrepreneur, running a small business, or a nonprofit, finding ways to promote and differentiate your business can be challenging, especially in the world of video messaging. In this course, I'll show you how to create 5 video styles which have proven effective for other businesses, and you've probably seen a few of them on TV crafted by major brands. But you don't have to be a Fortune 1000 company to produce these quality videos. You just need to understand their structure and how you fit into them. Throughout this course, I will teach you these 5 basic videos and how you can easily and professionally produce them yourself. Each style suits a different purpose and can be used across multiple platforms, which is essential to having real impact. Okay, are you ready? Let's start with the video business card. Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show. Talking today with Liz Wooten Reschke about nonprofit consulting and the joys, the bliss, the struggles, the fun, the amazing opportunities that it is. And I want to get now into a section that I like to end with the show called Truth or Care. And that is, what is your heart's definition of philanthropy? Very personally, why are you involved in it? You know, you shared with us at the beginning that you grew up through nonprofits and that you recognize that from being involved with the Girl Scouts on up. But what is keeping you working with nonprofits now?
Selfishly, it's because it makes me feel good. And I think that it's kind of a duality in that. It makes me feel good to know that I can help others. Mm-hmm. It makes me feel even better to know that I can help my community. And so I'm a 4th generation Floridian. I'm kind of a rarity in that occasion, especially in Tampa Bay.
You're what we call a cracker.
I am. I'm a 4th generation Florida cracker, and my kids are 5th generation. So it's a wonderful opportunity, though, to give back to a community that I love, to give back to a state that I love, but in another personal way, too. It's also a way to honor many of my family who are no longer with us. My stepdad was just one of the greatest philanthropists and givers I ever knew. My grandmother, same way. And I mean, really, I could go down the litany of family members and just kind of a way to honor them, too, because it's one of those opportunities when you know that you have the potential to give, when you know that you have the potential to connect a community, it's almost the question of why not? Mm-hmm. Why would I not? And it's not that other sectors haven't been interesting. I actually was a public school teacher before I went into the nonprofit sector.
I could see that.
You know, I was a Miss Woo for a long time.
Miss Woo.
Yes,
oh my gosh, you know that's your nickname now.
I know. I've totally stepped into that. But the opportunity with that too is, as I realized again, I like to help folks, and so how does that parlay into philanthropy? And I think again, philanthropy can be very narrow or it can be very broad, and I think there's a changing perspective that it is very broad. It affects us all, just as we all step into the nonprofit sector daily, whether or not we realize it. We step into the potential for philanthropy on a day-to-day basis, whether that's offering advice to my church, whether that is writing a donation, whether that's even this ALS Ice Bucket Challenge that just came up. That's philanthropy. Some people are interested in that kind of philanthropy and some people aren't, but there's so many different broad views of what philanthropy means. And so for me, selfishly, it makes me feel better. It makes me put my head down at the end of the day and go, job well done.
That's self-confidence and self-appreciation, which I don't think enough people do, which is tied to empowerment. It's very empowering to be able to give.
It is.
And thank you for your giving of your service. Thank you for giving of your time. And thank you for giving of your time to be on the show today.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure having you on.
Pleasure.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you.
Liz. This has been The Philanthropy Show. Join us next Monday at 4 o'clock, www.thephilanthropyshow.com.